everyone, and welcome back to the Wisdom by Harry YouTube channel. My name is Harry.
And I'm Mary. We're so excited to have you here today for another fascinating episode. Today we're looking into the economic connections, specifically the investments, between the U.S. and some key Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and the UAE primarily.
Yeah, and we're using reports from a recent U.S. presidential trip over there, plus a document about Saudi Arabia's big investment fund strategy.
Right. So our mission really is to figure out what's driving these huge money flows. You know, what's in it for the U.S., what's in it for the Gulf nations.
Exactly. We want to get a clear picture of the whole economic landscape here, go a bit beyond just the headlines.
Okay, so let's start with the U.S. side. There was this presidential visit. Reports said a big aim was locking down new investment commitments from the Gulf, right? Money coming into the U.S.
That's definitely a key part. For the U.S. government, getting these pledges is useful in, well, a couple of ways. First, obviously, the cash itself is meant to boost certain parts of the U.S. economy directly. And second, it's a political point, too. Securing these deals lets the president say, look, we're bringing investment home, fitting that sort of America First narrative.
And this push for investment, it was happening when the U.S. economy was facing some headwinds, wasn't it? We heard about economic output slowing a bit, plus all the ongoing disruption in global trade from tariffs.
Yeah, exactly. That context makes attracting foreign capital even more appealing. You know, against that background, getting big money from the Gulf looks pretty good.
And we're talking serious money here.
We really are. Potentially huge sums. Saudi Arabia had already mentioned, I think, investing $600 billion in the U.S. over 4 years.
All right, I remember that figure.
And the U.S. president apparently wanted to see that number climb maybe even towards $1 trillion.
$1 trillion, that's just hard to even grasp. So what kinds of deals were they actually talking about to reach that kind of scale?
Well, the idea was to link the economies more closely. Things like joint ventures between U.S. and Saudi companies, big purchases of American weapons and other goods by the Saudis.
Okay.
And, of course, direct investment into key industries in the U.S.
And the main player, especially for Saudi Arabia, is their sovereign wealth fund, right?
Yeah.
The Public Investment Fund, or PIF. They're already involved in the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. The PIF is central. Think of it as the Saudi government's main investment arm. It's built up from the country's wealth, mostly oil money historically.
Right.
And its job now is really to diversify Saudi Arabia's economy, grow its wealth long term. It's massive, maybe close to $1 trillion in assets under management. And like you said, it already owns pieces of well-known U.S. companies.
Like who?
Well, names you'd recognize. Uber, Electronic Arts, the video game company, and Lucid Motors, the EV maker. So they've already got these connections, providing a sort of base to build on.
Okay, but it's not just Saudi Arabia we're talking about. The UAE is also making some pretty big moves towards U.S. investment.
Definitely. The UAE's commitment is huge, too. They've announced plans to invest something like $1.4 trillion in the U.S. over the next 10 years.
Wow, $1.4 trillion?
Yeah, a massive long-term pledge. And their focus seems very strategic areas like AI, semiconductors, advanced energy, manufacturing, high-growth future stuff.
Interesting. So it really shows how tied together these economies are becoming.
It does, and it's interesting to see how those investment areas line up with what the UAE itself wants to achieve back home.
Okay, so that covers the U.S. wanting the investment. Let's flip it. Why are the Gulf states doing this? It can't just be about finding a safe place for their money, surely.
No, not at all. It's very much a two-way street. While the U.S. wants the capital, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they want something back. They're looking to attract U.S. investment into their countries, and maybe even more importantly,
technology, expertise.
Exactly. Access to cutting-edge American tech and know-how. This is all part of their big picture plan, diversifying their own economies, moving away from just relying on oil and gas money.
Right, that diversification theme keeps coming up. How do these investments in the U.S. actually help them diversify back home?
Well, think about it. Both Saudi Arabia and the UAE know they can't depend on oil forever. So investing in and partnering with U.S. tech firms, especially in areas like AI, helps them build up their own new industries. It's about future-proofing their economies, basically, gaining that knowledge.
And you mentioned AI. The UAE seems particularly focused on becoming a big player there.
That's a huge strategic goal for them, yes. They've explicitly said they want to be a global hub for AI development and use.
Okay, and to do that, they need the hardware, right? The advanced computer chips.
Precisely. And that means access to top-tier U.S. semiconductor technology is vital. Now, this connects to something interesting. U.S. chip export rules. There used to be restrictions on selling certain high-end U.S. chips to the Gulf. But those rules have been, let's say, adjusted recently. And that could potentially open the door for new deals between the U.S. and countries like the UAE, specifically about getting access to these crucial chips.
So for the UAE's AI dream, getting those chips is, like, non-negotiable?
It's seen as absolutely essential, yeah. Foundational for becoming leaders in AI.
Okay. Now, let's zoom in on Saudi Arabia again. You hear a lot about their Vision 2030 plan. That seems to be the framework for everything they're doing, including these investments. Can you give us the nutshell version?
Sure. Vision 2030 is basically Saudi Arabia's blueprint for the future. It's this huge, ambitious plan covering economic and social changes. The big goals are diversify away from oil, build new industries, attract foreign money, and just generally improve life for Saudis.
And part of that involves some absolutely massive building projects, right?
Massive is the word. Huge infrastructure and development projects are central to the whole vision.
And the PIF, the investment fund we talked about, is driving this. It's more than just a bank account.
Oh, much more. The PIF is the engine making Vision 2030 happen on the economic side. It's not just managing money. It's actively using that money to create new growth areas in Saudi Arabia, invest in key local sectors, bring in advanced technologies from overseas, and build strategic partnerships globally.
So it's actively shaping the Saudi economy, not just investing passively.
Exactly. It's an instrument of transformation.
What are some actual examples of what the PIF is doing to achieve this?
Well, they're involved in a whole range of things, starting up entirely new industries within the kingdom, working hard to attract foreign tech companies and get that knowledge transfer happening,
Right.
and building alliances with major global companies across lots of different fields.
And then there are those huge, almost sci-fi projects we keep hearing about, the Giga projects. Can you tell us a bit more about those? They sound wild.
They really are something else in terms of scale and ambition. Okay, let's start with NEO. This is envisioned as a completely new region built from scratch, focused on sustainability, future industries, innovation. And inside NEOM, you have the line.
The city that's just one long building.
Essentially, yeah. A linear city concept. The idea is clean energy, super fast transport. They talk about end-to-end in 20 minutes and everything you need within a 5-minute walk. It's meant to be incredibly efficient and livable. They're even building their own airport for NEOM and a huge green hydrogen plant.
It sounds incredible. What other Giga projects are there?
Another big one is Qiddiya. This is being set up as Saudi Arabia's capital for entertainment, sports, and arts.
Okay, so moving beyond just business.
Definitely. The first phase is supposed to open soon, with something like 60 different projects, theme parks like Six Flags, cultural venues, sports facilities. It's a major push into tourism and leisure.
Wow. What else?
Then you've got the Red Sea Project, which is now called AMEA. This is aiming to be an ultra-luxury tourist spot, focusing on wellness, health, that kind of thing.
High-end tourism.
Very high-end. Lots of focus on unique design and sustainability. They're aiming for net zero carbon emissions. And again, its own international airport is nearly finished, making it easier to get to.
It's interesting. A real focus on luxury and eco-consciousness there. And wasn't there one more major project focused on housing?
Yes, that's ROSHN. It's a national real estate developer. Its main job is to help more Saudi citizens own their own homes. They're building these big, modern housing communities all across the country. It directly supports that Vision 2030 goal of getting homeownership up to 70%.
Okay, so these massive projects are definitely attention-grabbing. But the PIF is doing more than just these huge developments, right?
Oh, absolutely. Those are the headlines, but its work is broader. The PIF is also investing in developing other key parts of the Saudi economy. Supporting real estate projects elsewhere in the country, boosting the retail sector.
How so?
Well, for instance, through investments in companies like Noon, which is now a major e-commerce player across the Middle East. So they're building up different domestic sectors too.
And internationally, we mentioned Uber and Lucid earlier. Are they investing elsewhere globally too?
Yes, their international portfolio is pretty diverse. They've put significant money into U.S. infrastructure, for example, through Blackstone's fund. They're heavily invested in tech via the SoftBank Vision Fund and other direct stakes like Magic Leap. And they have investments in many other sectors around the world. It's a global strategy for growth and, again, diversification.
It really does sound like a multi-pronged global approach. Is the PIF also focused on developing Saudi talent alongside all this investing, building up their own expertise?
Yes, that's definitely part of the plan for long-term success. They've actually set up specific bodies for this, like the PIF Academy for Training and Development, and a Center for Governance to improve how their companies are run.
Ah, okay.
The idea is to build a skilled Saudi workforce and make sure they're using international best practices in everything they do.
So with all this spending, domestic and international, where does the PIF actually get its money from?
It comes from a few main places. Direct cash injections from the Saudi government itself, borrowing money through loans and bonds. Sometimes the government transfers state-owned assets over to the PIF.
Right.
And importantly, they reinvest the profits they make from their existing investments. So it's a mix of funding sources that fuels all this activity.
Okay, so let's try and tie this all together. What we're seeing is this really significant, complex web of investment and technology sharing between the U.S. and these Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And it looks like both sides have clear strategic reasons for doing it.
Exactly right. The U.S. gets needed capital, a potential economic boost. The Gulf nations get help diversifying their economies, access to vital technology, and stronger global partnerships. These aren't just one-off deals. It feels like part of a much longer game for everyone involved. Economic transformation, global influence.
It's been fascinating mapping this out. So just to recap, huge amounts of money are moving strategically. The U.S. needs investment. The Gulf states need diversification and tech. And Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 with these incredible giga projects really shows the scale of ambition involved.
Absolutely. And looking ahead, you have to wonder, how will all this deep economic integration, these huge tech partnerships, actually change the global economic power balance over the next few decades?
That's the big question.
And thinking about projects like NEOM or the focus on AI, what does this mean for the future of cities? For technology itself, globally? It raises all sorts of interesting possibilities, maybe some challenges too, that come from tying economic and tech futures so closely together. Something for you, the listener, to think about.